21st Century Entrepreneurship with Martin Piskarik.
To begin, you can start with a quick story just happened this past week. Was in a meeting, actually Monday morning, meeting with our primary sponsor for our business, a bank, in fact, that just became a sponsor with us, Piraeus Bank, Greek bank here, active in Ukraine, still very active in investing here. And as has become somewhat, I guess, almost expected with air raids consistently, nearly every day here in Kyiv. We were in the meeting about 10 a.m. In the morning, had just started. And then as we're holding normal business conversation, we heard this loud boom, not terribly far from where we were. Which startled us, and we were very surprised because typically we would get some sort of air raid notification to understand that the bombs are coming. So usually you have some notice to then sort of scramble away, go to the bomb shelter if you want. But we were all surprised, and we were kind of wondering, was it actually a bomb? Because we didn't get notifications, but it sounded like one, of course. And as we're discussing that, and about 10, 15 seconds later, we heard the next one, and that was beyond doubt, clearly another bomb. And these, as we understood later, they hit less than a mile from where we were holding our meeting. And so then we instinctively, without a word, all got up out of the room and went downstairs into the bomb shelter, where we continued the rest of our meeting for about the next 30 minutes or so, until kind of felt comfortable that sort of the worst of the bombings had passed. And so then we returned back upstairs to the meeting room. I say this because, to be perfectly honest, this sounds obviously very odd to ears in the Western world who aren't dealing with this on a daily basis. But it's something that's shockingly, after a couple of days and doing that, what I just described a few times now. I've been here for about 5 months now, living here in Kyiv. It becomes you get somewhat comfortable with it. Obviously, it's always unnerving, but it just becomes part of life, and you get somewhat used to it, and you continue to manage, and that's why everybody talks about the resilience of Ukrainians, of course, because and I can see it and feel it, and I'm living it as well, being here amidst this. So. But anyhow, how did I end up here? How did I get here to Ukraine? Why? So I moved here October 2023. So the long story of my background. So I have sort of academic, professional, and personal interests that have sort of guided my entire sort of adult life, really, and career to what I believe is where I should be in life at the moment. Coming here to Ukraine at this obviously very historical juncture in global history. And so just starting from the beginning, my grandmother is actually from Western Ukraine, fled during the first famine in the early 1920s in Ukraine, left by herself, actually, after her whole family had died in the flu epidemic, and then the first famine, came to the United States, and then, of course, my mother and my siblings, all of us born in Cleveland, Ohio. But I think this is where sort of the roots of sort of my Ukrainian Polish heritage encouraged me then to focus on history in university. So I focused on sort of Central and Eastern European, Russian Empire history in university. Then I lived for a couple of years, in fact, actually at the time, early 2000s, in St. Petersburg in Russia, studied Russian language there. Then following that, went to graduate school at Johns Hopkins SAIS, got a master's degree in what was called Russian and Eurasian Studies and International Economics. So this has been sort of my personal and academic background, which then led to the rest of my career for the last about 14 years now, focusing on Central and Eastern Europe and former Russian Empire, former Soviet states, working as a political economic security analyst for various companies. The most recent company before moving here to Ukraine, I started working for a company called Frontier View, which is a political economic risk consulting firm for Western multinational businesses. Moved to London in 2015 to take that position. Over the years, promoted to become managing director of all of Europe. So my focus was always on sort of Russia, Ukraine, former Soviet states, Eastern Europe, but then through my analyst covering the rest of Western and Central Europe. With that, I loved the job, of course, inspiring and invigorating every day, loved my bosses, loved the work, exactly what I wanted to be doing. But as we came to, with the war and everything, I felt somewhat compelled to do more. Right, I really love the position. It's intellectually engaging, it's impactful. Businesses appreciate the assistance from us, our views on the future. In short, we're really trying to predict the future for businesses and how the political, the economic, the security environment will impact the investment environment for them. So it's really a fascinating job, and essentially I took that experience and now I'm devoting it entirely to Ukraine. So I was, strangely enough, I was promoted on a Monday to managing director, and on a Friday I resigned so that I could move to Ukraine, move to a war zone, an active war zone, with no income, start a new company with my business partner here, and essentially bring that skill set and and work on something I deeply believe in and am passionate about, and I strongly believe in Ukraine's Western orientation and its sort of inevitable future towards the West and its recovery and its reconstruction, and playing some small part to help contribute to the economy and the growth in the country's recovery. I joined in October when I moved here. I joined Ukraine Business News, which has been owned and run by my business partner, Andrew Prima. He and I had developed a nice, strong relationship over the last several years, and is really solidified by our doing several webinars at the outset of the war in order to, as a charity movement, to try to attract donations to Ukraine and help his team members, of course, who obviously had been going under some financial duress in light of the war and drops of sponsors and things like that. So he and I developed a quite strong relationship and had similar interests in trying to obviously do what we can to help Ukraine. So that's why in the end made the move, came here, and he and I started what's called UBN Network. So Ukraine Business News being the media platform, then working off of that started our new company. So both of us co-founding UBN Network. And UBN Network, in just a quick word, as we say, we like to connect the macro to the micro. So looking at the 30,000-foot view of global events, of the entire external environment, right, for business investors, right? Looking at China's growth, global economy, U.S. funding decisions in Congress, the future of the Putin regime and the war, EU interest rate decisions, inflation around the world, food inflation, commodity prices, etc. Taking this 30,000-foot view and then bringing it down and connecting it to Ukraine specifically, what this means for Ukraine's economy, Ukraine's future, investment environment, inflation, interest rates, etc. And then bringing it down to our core targets client base, which is Western multinational companies, and how does this impact them moving down to the 1,000-foot view, right? How will this impact their investment decisions? How does this impact demand from their key accounts, from their core customers? How does this impact their decisions for salary increases or cutting, firing workers, relations with distributors, relations with retailers and pricing negotiations, and all the executional dynamics involved. But that's why clients like us, because we offer sort of this these forecasts, macroeconomic forecasts, but these predictions also about the global economy and the war in Ukraine and all the other dynamics going up, commodity prices, and then linking it to that external environment, linking it to what it means for their business and their decision making in the coming 6 months, in the coming year, in the coming 3 years, etc. Through UBN Network, we speak with businesses every day. And we just held our most recent event, middle of March here, 117 attendees, government officials speaking, top executives on panels talking about the business environment, et cetera. Every discussion we have, it comes up. Is corporate willing to invest further? What does corporate need to see in order to invest further if they're not currently investing? So a couple of things across the board, and this has been surprising to people outside of Ukraine, pretty much across the board with every prominent Western multinational corporation that we work with, essentially none of them have cut off investments to Ukraine. They all plan to stay the course. They all see a very optimistic, strong future for Ukraine. Some of them say maybe it's 5 years down the line. Some of them believe maybe it's 1.5 years. But in either case, they are staying the course for Ukraine. And also they want to retain the talent. They feel that they have a strong team and they want to continue to keep that team in place. And then they also feel somewhat of a moral duty to continue to assist the team. But shockingly, it's not necessarily all morals, because a lot of the companies, I mean, the most recent polling we did, over 70% of companies were not only saw revenue growth in 2023, but also saw profits rise in 2023. And that's across all businesses. Consumer goods are generally doing better than other businesses. B2B, a little bit weaker. Healthcare, strong. IT, strong. But on some of the various industries, particularly metals, of course, relatively weak, but agriculture, food, drink doing quite well. So there's variation. But in either case, sending those numbers back to corporate is actually very encouraging to continue to promote the business and keep driving the business. So surprisingly, we do see strong support from corporate for continued support for the business. Now, accelerating investments and expanding the business is a different story. For consumer goods businesses, we do see that. For healthcare businesses, we do see that as well. Not necessarily dramatic, say compared to a couple of years ago, but there still is strong support for expanding investments in a number of these sectors. That said, of course, the general mood overall would be hesitance, holding back investment. Now, another interesting dynamic is that surveys also show that most of these corporations actually have significant resources that they could be investing, and there's hesitance and they're holding back, right? So well over half of companies have, about 75% of companies actually have resources for at least 6 months. So they actually have the money to be investing. And then just anecdotally, every client I speak with, essentially, I ask them, when do you think corporate will actually start to make significant investments, right? Not just hire a couple of people, but maybe establish a new branch in a regional city, something like this. And the interesting part is that the answer is we're waiting. It's too unsure right now. Things are too uncertain. Corporate has gotten a bit discouraged, of course, as Russia continues to bomb across the entire country. The counteroffensive, Ukraine's counteroffensive, didn't win the war for Ukraine. So this, of course, deterred investment to a degree. However, the interesting part is that most companies say if we wait until the end of this year, it'll be too late and our competition will get ahead of us. So this provides somewhat of a dilemma, which they don't know the answer to. And so I can't tell you what the answer is either, because they don't really know, is that they feel some urgency. We can't just wait another 6-9 months because then competition will get ahead of us, but it's still too unsure and unpredictable at the moment to make any strong plans. So, and of course, corporate is watching the war, on BBC, on CNN, on Fox News, and it's not necessarily encouraging to be seeing bombing raids and apartment buildings falling apart and cars blown up. So, so that's as an executive said, an executive based here, prominent GM for a prominent Western company. So he said, "It's only when I travel abroad and I'm in London that I get scared of the war here in Ukraine." Right now, that's if you're in Kyiv. I don't mean to, of course, sort of downplay, if you're farther east in the cities that are less protected. But in terms of corporate investment, it really has absolutely the coverage deters Western investors, unfortunately. Ukraine actually, interestingly, from the investment perspective, is relatively appealing. As I mentioned, corporate is, headquarters outside of Ukraine is, of course, hesitant to invest too strongly, but they have a very optimistic view of the future. And Ukraine is going to be one of the best performing, most interesting, dynamic countries in the world with accelerating growth at the global level, right? And the other nice point is that it sits within the Central European portfolio, which, if you look at Central Europe for the last decade, and in the coming 5 years, assuredly, it has been one of the best performing regions at the global level, and will continue to be, right, for the foreseeable future. Since Ukraine is often run out of Warsaw, that investment is going to absolutely then pick up even further for Ukraine. But if you look at some of the fundamental features for Ukraine, right, very large population, the massive recovery money that will be coming in. We're talking about Marshall Plan, several multiples of the Marshall Plan with investment coming in. That's public money, likely taking Russia's FX reserves over time to help sort of serve as a foundation for that. You see all that coming. Then the international financial institutions send more money in. Then you see private companies on top of that jumping in when they see that foundation. So you're going to see massive amounts of money flowing into this country in the coming years. If you look around the world, we're talking about growth rates, maximum 2.5%, 3% for the next 5 years. There's really no way we can jumpstart the global economy. US is one of the bright lights, and we're talking 2% maybe. Europe is going to be growing around 1%. China, maximum 5% this year, maybe next year. After that, we're talking 4% and perhaps lower, with lots of risks, obviously. So we're talking about, at the global level, 3% growth. Ukraine could be easily growing year after year after year, 6, 7, 8%, far exceeding these levels, right? So I'd obviously encourage as companies, be the first mover, get in now, as my business partner and I are doing, right? Get in now, get moving now, set the foundation. And that's why, to their credit, a lot of Western businesses are continuing to invest and sustain the business and retain the talent in anticipation of this acceleration, which, again, if you go across Latin America, you're not going to get that level of growth in any major country. Brazil's not going to be growing that way. Mexico won't be growing that way. Look into Africa. Nigeria, South Africa, Kenya are not going to be growing that way in the next few years. You look at Asia with China slowing down, that's going to obviously limit some of the growth rates that we've seen, extremely high growth rates in a lot of Asia. And then, of course, in the rest of Europe. So again, a bright light here when you look at the overall global portfolio for Western companies. That said, how are we assisting companies, right? So just in terms of our product portfolio, what we offer, the core of our service are the 4 large live events here in Kyiv, right? So we've actually had 2 of them. So we had our first event last November, and we had our first event of 2024 here in the middle of March. Both received very positive feedback, over 100 attendees at each of the events. Government ministers talking about the future of Ukraine, the future of the war, etc. So, so that's the foundation of the business. During that, of course, there is considerable networking, which our clients take advantage of, and then we have reports that we publish. So, on top of our daily economic digest published by Ukraine Business News, as part of Ukraine Business Network, we publish monthly reports, which is designed specifically for corporate executives. They don't have time or interest or energy to read deep analysis that's 40 pages long. They want to see what happened and what does it mean for the investment environment. So we really are very focused on drilling down into why it matters for a Western investor, what happened in the last month at the political level, the economic level, on the battlefield, interest rate decisions, et cetera, major investment decisions. What does it matter then for businesses in the coming months, in the coming year? We also do quarterly reports, larger reports, which provide an annual outlook. So there we have of course, our macroeconomic forecast, but also our scenarios for the war, how we anticipate it playing out, and then getting more in depth at demand drivers for consumer goods companies, for B2B firms, for say healthcare firms, other companies selling to the government, looking at the currency and making projections and how the currency is performed. So those would be some of the core reports. And then the last report, we do a quarterly survey. And so we survey our client base to understand their mood. Basically, it's called the Voice of the Market report, to understand how do these companies view the market currently, and updating this every 3 months. How do they view their profits, their sales, pricing, HR decisions, their view, is the war going to end this year or next year or later? And then having conversations with them, so we understand really what is top of mind for them. What are they worried about? What are they focused on? Where do they see opportunities? Relations with corporate, is corporate supportive? And so really providing a comprehensive sort of on the quantitative side, right, and on the qualitative side, providing both the commentary, but then also the survey results, right? So you get the actual data, which we get very positive feedback on. So you get a good view and feel for how Western investors are viewing Ukraine in a very timely fashion every 3 months. So this is how we help companies that obviously are already here considering future investment, but then all those companies that are looking to move to Ukraine and be a part of the recovery and the reconstruction and this accelerated growth. Helps them understand the external environment, network with the appropriate people, getting in touch with HR firms or banks, financial corporations, legal firms to help them set up their business. So we help facilitate within our network, help facilitate those introductions. And then also we do a lot of sectoral work. So we do sectoral analysis, whether it might be healthcare or construction, real estate, warehousing, energy, et cetera, to help them better understand really the competitive landscape within that sector, but then also the demand opportunities, the executional challenges of operating in Ukraine. we have a unique offering because we have an extensive network here, right? And so that gives us access to, the hearts and minds of the executives here on the ground in Kyiv that we talk to every day. And then secondly, talking to the government ministers and the officials who come to the events. So as an example, last event, again, very positive feedback because what people told us they loved hearing, in particular, the government officials. So we had, for example, the Deputy Prime Minister in charge of Euro integration. So she's the woman she basically achieved Ukraine's accession in last December, into the EU, and has been spearheading this entire drive into NATO and the EU. She spoke. I moderated with my business partner Andrew the panel with her, and so they got to hear directly from the horse's mouth, what is Ukraine's status currently? What are your expectations? When will Ukraine get into EU and NATO? When will that happen? What's holding that back? What are the problems? And she was very direct and frankly spoke very non-political, giving very direct answers to these critical questions, of course, that businesses want to know. After her, we had the former Minister of Defense, Alexei Reznikov, speak. He's been there since the beginning. He was the Minister of Defense, right, at the time of the invasion, holding daily conversations, of course, with all the Western allies, procuring all that defense support all the last 2 years of the war. And so hearing from him, what does he expect for the future of the war? Where are things, for example, domestic defense production, right, within Ukraine, for their ability to, for example, as Israel has had to sort of fend for itself over the years. Ukraine obviously foresees that future for itself. And so they're obviously taking measures there. But those are just some quick examples. Having access to these types of people who can give very, very in-depth and information that's not necessarily available elsewhere. But what clients really like to hear is getting sort of the hearing what other companies are thinking and feeling and doing, because it's somewhat surprising, but so many of these companies, even within their sector, they may not know exactly, well, how do other companies, are they raising salaries by X percentage or not? Are they hiring or are they firing? Or how much are they raising prices by, and things like this? What's the mood within their organization compared to ours? And a lot of times it's somewhat surprising, perhaps, but they're somewhat blind to what's going on, not just in their sector, but just in the general business environment. So they really appreciate when we come into their office, and we've been in meetings every day with different clients, and we're sharing stories. Well, actually, in the B2B space, in this sector, this is what they're seeing and feeling, and this is what's going on. And amongst, competitors within your sector, this is the general mood, and this is the attitude that we're hearing and seeing. So again, another nuance that you don't get from other business groups, really, because we have such intimate relations on a daily basis with the general managers here. Please do click on the link in the description in the podcast, and we'd be very happy to assist you. Let us help you open those doors, facilitate those relationships, hear from the top executives in the country, hear from the top officials about the direction of Ukraine, and help us sort of translate it and help you navigate the investment environment based upon all of these dynamics in this extremely fluid, uncertain environment, but in a country that is assuredly going to become one of the most attractive investment markets at the global level in the coming years.
"21st Century Entrepreneurship" with Martin Piskarik.
Imagine a space where triumphs, trials, and tales of entrepreneurship come alive. Welcome to the 21st Century Entrepreneurship Podcast, a gold awarded journey hosted by Martin Piskarik, connecting with listeners in 95 countries and ranking in the top 0.5% of all podcasts. Join our exclusive community, elevate your perspective, and embark on the path to success.